Hello, I'm Craig, and welcome to another episode of Football Kit Memories, the football podcast that gets under the shirt. Today, I meet John Walker, host and creator of the excellent Scots Abroad podcast. Recorded just before the Euro 2020 squad announcement, we talked Scotland and the reasons why John set up his podcast in order to track the growing number of Scottish footballers, as well as the other interesting Caledonians doing their thing abroad. We also cover his other podcasts, the Trampled Bet, and I find out about his ambition to become a professional football coach. Later, I asked John to pick three of his favourite football shirts and tell me a little bit about what they mean to him. We put our club differences aside as we discuss John's side Rangers, the World Cup in France '98, and we finish with a double winning Arsenal shirt worn by his hero, Freddie Ljungberg. Remember, you can listen to this and other episodes of Football Kit Memories on all major audio platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do like, follow, share, but above all, please do enjoy the podcast. Okay, so today on the podcast, I'm joined by the host of the excellent Scots Abroad pod. It's John Walker. How you doing, mate?
Not bad, Craig. How's yourself?
Mate, very well. Really glad to speak to you.
I feel like I was saying to you before we just started, I feel like I've spent the whole day with you, Craig, because I've listened to 10, I think it's about 10 of your podcasts. I did cherry pick first. I went for Gordon for the Tartan Scarf. I went to two boys, Joel and Craig from View from the Terrace. Yeah. I went John Johnson, your last one. Then I went to Craig, the Arsenal photographer, Phil Differ. I've been through a lot of hours of your voice, so it seems weird now. It seems like I'm listening to a celebrity now, Craig. Feels like I've met somebody.
Mate, that sounds like punishment to me. I think 10 plays in one day might well be a record as well. So there you go. So, mate, do you want to just give us a bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm John Walker. I am the host of the Scots Abroad podcast. I run the Twitter page, which has become way more successful than the podcast had previously. Right. Just keeping up to date with sports stars, professionals that have went outside the UK, or when I say professionals, I'm talking comedians, actors, musicians who have maybe toured the world that have maybe got a story or two to tell about what it's like being a Scot travelling around the world.
So is the idea then to kind of like really broaden it out? So you focused on sports people, but I noticed there's a musician recently, right? Like you say, so.
Yeah, we had Barry James on for Cassidy. Barry James has done solo stuff. The idea is to get comedians on. We've got Ray Bradshaw coming on next, who's done sellout tours and won awards in Australia, doing their comedy festivals, gigged in America, gigged in other parts of Asia. And yet to get musicians on, people like try to get Mogwai on, Travis on, just different people, variety. It's just really a promotion of any Scottish talent that we have, because it was something you were saying to John Johnston actually about Gordon, changing the mindset of not just the Scotland national team and its fans, but Scotland as a whole to stop kicking itself when it doesn't need to, because it's got all these examples of being really good at what it does.
Yeah. Well, you notice that so much in like I always think American sport, it's all about celebrating success at like every single level, isn't it? It's like kids play baseball and they win massive trophies and celebrate all that kind of stuff. But it just feels like we, and not just in Scotland, I think the whole UK, we just don't have that mentality, do we, I guess?
No, we really don't, and we don't like bigging ourselves up, and we really do like to be overly modest all the time. I don't know, I think that's what happened with the Scotland fans, on Gordon's point a little bit, is we almost got happy being miserable. Yeah. Because we'd lead to something to moan about.
I don't know. Do you know what? That's a really tough one, because I stopped going about, must be about 5 or 6 years ago, because I got really pissed off with the mentality of, oh, well, we've lost again, let's just get pissed anyway kind of thing. And that really started to bother me, because you think, how much money does it cost you to go abroad and watch these games? But, that you should want better for that. You should want better for your team, I think.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that is shifting, to be fair. I think this generation that's coming, this younger generation of Scotland fans now, when I look at the talent that is coming through at the under-20s, especially under-21s, into this national team, I think there's going to be a Scotland team. These kids that are growing up are going to experience what our parents probably experienced, which was Scotland going to major tournament after major tournament, and it become the norm. And they're going to have to listen to us lecture them over and over again about how they need to cherish every single one of these games. They can't leave a game early. They need to enjoy every game. None of it's a chore. Because if I had known what France '98 would have been at a school kid, I would not have been out playing while Scotland played Morocco and not watching the game.
Yeah, totally. So how long have you been running that podcast, John?
So the podcast itself on its own has only been about 6-7 months. That's why the page looks so new. But we had ran it. So when we started the Trampled Bet podcast, which is just a betting podcast, we realised very quickly that 2-3 white guys discussing analytics and football betting was hardly the most charismatic listen you could have imagined. So I'd always been obsessed at that point. David Bates had just left Rangers to go to Hamburg. Ryan Gauld was at Aves at the time. Jack Harper was at Malaga. And with Liam Henderson was... Where was Liam Henderson at the time? Wasn't Verona. Oh my God, maybe...
Bari? Did he go to Bari?
Bari, yeah, I think it was Bari. Oh my God, that's embarrassing. I can't remember exactly where he was at a set time. That's quite embarrassing. But those were the 4 key guys. And I was like, you know what would be quite cool? I'm fed up hearing the rinse and repeat Ryan Gauld article once every 12 months.
Yes.
That's, what happened to this wonder kid? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start keeping an eye on him. Why don't we just have a wee 5-minute segment in between our discussion of last week's betting picks before we go into this week's betting picks, where we just say, here's what some of the Scottish talent outside of the UK is doing and how they're getting on. And it was just to break up the sports betting chat, because even I couldn't listen to it back. Like we're lucky enough, we've got a guy who's very talented and does all the producing. Right. But I was like, I don't know how you can listen to that back, because it's a struggle for me. Like the results were always good, but it was boring as hell, man.
Yeah.
So I lived for this little bit. And then we started getting listeners going, oh, by the way, you've missed Rachel Corsey, who's the Scotland women's national team captain, who's out in America. You've missed Fiona Brown, who's out in Sweden. You've missed Lana Cleland, who's out in Italy at the time, who just won the Golden Boot in Italy for Bari, which I do remember.
Yep.
And then Stephen Lennon, I totally forgot about him being out in Iceland, breaking all the records. I was like, oh my God, this is going to grow arms and legs.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where somebody went, should you not be doing interviews with these people? Because this is actually quite a good niche.
Yeah.
Like you have found a wee channel here. And I was like, right, but it's the same with everything. You'll see it now, Craig, that you've started interviewing people. Mm-hmm. Once you get one decent guest, it validates everything that you're trying to go to. Yeah. And you've got a system, a record to go, by the way, we interviewed X last month. Would you fancy coming on? And before you know it, that's it. And it just steamrolls and snowballs. And that's what happened with us. It just so happened that after about 9 months of messaging people on Twitter, finding emails, finding agents' names, trying to phone people, that Ziggy Gordon, the Hamilton academical legend, decided to move to Australia. Right. And it just so happened that I play sevens with somebody who's pally with his family and quite pally with Ziggy. And he went, I could probably get Ziggy to come on and do an episode. Right. And it was just one of those things. The minute that interview happened, and for anyone that's listened to that, Ziggy Gordon is probably the nicest interview that anyone could ever have. He could talk about football all day.
Yeah.
And once we had one, that was it. Everything just fell in for there, because we could just go to everyone and go, we interviewed Ziggy Gordon from Central Coast Mariners, Fiona Brown, who was the Scotland national team winger, was playing out in Rosengard, had just won the Swedish title after the previous season of winning the Swedish Cup.
Right.
Like, yeah, I'll do it. Then once she done it, Rachel Corsey had a system, had someone to say, I've interviewed for the women's team. Rachel Corsey then agreed to do it. And then once you've interviewed the Scotland women national team captain, you can kind of get whoever you want to pull in.
I was going to ask you, so I think what I really enjoy about the podcast, John, is that you mentioned you see these articles get rolled out every 12 months. And I think you, as well as that on Twitter, you kind of there's certainly around Ryan Gauld, for instance, there's a real kind of the Ryan Gauld train that everyone's on kind of thing. And we're seeing these goals that he scores for fat ends, or it's often it's an assist, isn't it? And all this kind of clever stuff that he does. But what I wondered was, how are you getting these guys to share so much? Professional footballers are usually very guarded, aren't they? Or at least protected by the club, not to say anything. You're really getting them to share and offer something really interesting on those pods, mate.
Beyond being extremely likable, Craig. Beyond being
a charming man.
No, I've got a face that I wouldn't trust if I came across it. But no, I think I've always been pretty honest, and I think it's been reputation that's spread from each person, in which I've always done similar to what we've done there, a little bit of back and forth before we record.
Yeah.
Try and just get people relaxed.
Yeah.
It's kind of the proof is in the pudding. So when I say to the first guest, say whatever the fuck you want, you and your agent will get this, and you can pull out anything that you don't like.
Right.
And I will stand by that. And nobody will know about it except me and the producer. That'll be it. There won't be some clickbait headline because you've said something stupid about an ex-manager or an ex-player.
Yeah.
If you've said something just chatting to me that you've been comfortable with me, if you don't like it, it gets pulled. That's only happened once or twice, and it's been really minuscule things that's been said about,
Okay.
as I said, an ex-player or ex-manager, and we've pulled it. And from that, we're able to then, I don't know that any players referenced another player, but I've been able to say, well, go speak to player X because we did do it for him, just to show that you can relax, you can tell us what you want, and we can take it from there. But I think it's just doing that. It's not fucking anyone about or messing anyone about or crossing anyone, because what I've noticed is a lot of our podcasts will then get picked up by papers to do the article, and they'll get the clickbait headline out the podcast, which is fine. But what I've realised very quickly is that I could do that. I could do the podcast, get the key story, I could go to the papers and make money, and also promote a podcast. But I also like the idea of them not having it. I like the idea that we've took it away from them. The guy didn't want to do their interview.
Of course.
He would rather do something else with someone else that wasn't going to maybe take the words and use them differently, and they still try and do it. But yeah, I think it's maybe just been that trust, because we still do. We're able to bounce straight to players that we've interviewed and ask them questions about certain things. I would never confirm or deny that the information has came from those players, but I think anyone who's asked me, I'll normally reply with the same horse's mouth gif. that kind of leaves me blankly going, well, I never confirmed anything.
Yeah.
But that's my source.
That's super interesting, isn't it? It's a kind of like obviously our newspapers, journalists have a reputation because of the job that they have to do. I think it's quite interesting that somebody like a footballer would trust a podcaster, somebody that's doing something slightly different, something longer form. I just think a really interesting take on kind of the world we live in, I guess, isn't it? Hopefully we'll kind of be able to get more of this in-depth stuff with footballers all around the world, really. It's so interesting.
Yeah, I think people are just bored of it as well. I think people have been stung. And I know for a fact Ryan Gauld had been stung so many different times by different Daily Record journalists and articles that were not what the purpose of the article was, which is why I think he was so quiet for so long. Like, there was the odd wee day trip to Firenze to see him that was done with the Daily Record that was quite good. But it was that kind of blocked out because he'd done ours. We got quite a lot of interest. There was a lot of paper articles because he'd mentioned something about Billy Gilmore potentially going away with one of the squads at the same age that Ryan Gauld did. So that got quite a lot of interest. But then from that, I've seen Ryan Gauld do a few podcasts since, which is really, really cool, because we're not taking any credit for that, but it does feel that maybe we opened them up to be like, you know what, not everyone's an arsehole. Some people actually just want to hear what you've got to say. And he's done the Dode podcast, which is a Dundee United podcast. And we've done one with Ben McNichol, the Short Corner podcast. He's done one with Proximada, which is the Portuguese Scouser podcast. It's really, really good. So I think that helps as well. Once you get introduced and you realise that people sometimes just want to hear your story because they're an actual fan of you, rather than somebody wants a story to sell their paper.
Totally, mate. Totally. So what is your background then? Like, before you got into podcasting, or was podcasting your full-time job?
No. Podcast is not my full-time job. I just work a normal 9-to-5 Monday gig, which allows me to listen to as many podcasts as I do.
Nice.
So no, my background's not podcasting. No real intention to make it my full-time gig. My full-time gig that I want to be, I think we kind of spoke briefly, is football coaching. I'm doing my UEFA A license just now, and I coach at Strathclyde University. So that's the goal. And I think probably the Scots Abroad is a little bit of investigation work for me as well, because it's not a dismissive thing, but I do feel like UK football is a bit of a boys' club, and you see people that have maybe broke the barrier quicker. Have been people who have veered right. So if you think of like Graham Potter, Ian Cathro, have veered outside of the UK to come back in at a higher level. And I just think I've always found that more interesting, and these stories are way more interesting to me than someone who's maybe tried to push their way through the system.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe trying to hear from people lessons that they've learned from different cultures, different countries, and what was interesting about those countries, because there is loads of cool stories that we've not even managed to get yet that we're still dying to tell.
It's an ambition for you to kind of work in a coaching role abroad in football outside of Scotland.
Yes, yeah, definitely, 100%. I would love to coach at a semi-pro professional level in any country, any point, but definitely would prefer to try it abroad than initially. In UK. I think it's just so much more interesting. I think there's so many different things to learn about culture. I've had jobs that have taken me to Latin America, like day jobs, and I have kind of been fascinated by different cultures and different countries. And then when I talk to all these players who are out doing different things and learning all these things, it just sounds so amazing. And to be able to do that with a work that's not just a mundane day job, it's something you actually enjoy as well, would just be fascinating. And as a whole, I really hope it's something I do, because for those who know the badges level, the UEFA license is like your highest badge before you can do the pro license, which you can't do unless you're invited on as a professional football manager.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's like it's the next level down from a Steven Gerrard.
So, mate, you mentioned the Trampled Bet as well. I wanted to know, this year, are you up or you're down?
Well, we're definitely up. This year's actually been quite incredible, and we've done really well. But see, the thing is, so Andy, who's one of the co-hosts, always presents a massive, beautiful Excel spreadsheet at the end of the year, which shows our return on investment as a betting podcast.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we've never sold ourselves as being tipsters, because it's just not a real thing.
Right.
It just isn't. You're dealing with football, with VAR, with footballers, with different weather. It's just not feasible to be this idea of a tipster. It doesn't exist. It never has existed. It never will exist. But we do like to present it in a format of banker, value, outsider, and then we do a charity treble. Yeah. And the outsiders are exactly what they are. We're trying to find you a 5-1 shot, and that has came up. Our producer Andy, our co-host Andy, sorry, got about 6 outsiders up in a row, like 241 in the Japanese league, because Andy's obsessed with Japanese football. Yeah, and this is what we try to do. We're not telling you that Bristol Rovers are going to beat Shrewsbury at the weekend, because most people can probably find that form out somewhere. Yeah. We're trying to find Australian, Japanese, Danish, Swedish. Gordo, who's the other co-host, loves French conference division football, because it kind of, you always get the top teams kind of run to form. Teams that get relegated out of the National go straight back up. So there is like an actual interesting format that I think we provide, but we do dip our toe now and again if we think there's something silly on offer in the UK football. But we're definitely up. Like, we've done so well this year.
Wow. Have you, do you find yourself kind of watching foreign leagues even more so than just in terms of that? Do you watching Japanese football, or?
Mate, we are like to cover Scots Abroad at a weekend, and I'm not the only one. I know there's other people like Byron Hutchison who do
he's great.
Like tremendous work with Scots, and he has data insight is unfucking believable, because that's what he does. That's what he does with his social media as well. So I'm not alone in this. So he'll also know what we go through. But we, like, any given weekend, now that you've got Steve Keen's the Melbourne Victory manager just now, you've got Tom Aldred, who could qualify for Scotland, plays for Brisbane Roar. You've got Kenny Miller, Ziggy Gordon, Graham Dorrans at Western Sydney. So any given weekend, I could be up at 6 a.m. to watch Australian football.
Wow.
Then I'll have normal football that I would watch at home.
Yeah.
And air quotes there, I realise that's terrible podcasting.
Air quotes.
And then at any given time, I could be, like, if I take the worst weekend, MLS being back now, I could be up to 3 a.m. watching a Sporting Kansas game or an Inter Miami game. Right. So when I look at Inter Miami's fixtures and see 6 p.m. on a Sunday, I'm like, thank God, man, because I've got to work tomorrow.
Yeah, delighted. Are they still on Sky Sports, those MLS games?
Yeah, the MLS is on Sky Sports again. Australian football is on BT. So there is like real good coverage. Like, it's excellent for what we are trying to do.
Yeah.
The social media teams in those leagues are tremendous as well for getting clips off of stuff, because it's like posted right away.
Yeah, that's good. Have you had any kind of players contact you on social media? Like, you're covering guys and really kind of speaking about them positively and bigging them up and stuff. Has any of them ever like kind of thanked you or said, "Oh, cheers for featuring me" and stuff?
No, not particularly. I've had a couple of players reach out to correct things that have been done, or representatives of the players or people who are close to the players. So I think, I don't know if you'd seen, like, maybe a month or two ago, I'd said that Ryan Gauld was available in a free transfer this summer. Yes. And I actually think pretty comfortably I was the person that broke that. Ooh. Because I think I was the only person with the knowledge of what was actually going on.
Yeah.
Because everyone, to a man and woman, kept repeating back the same thing to me. Go and look in transfer market. Go look when they signed him. It's a 2-year deal with a 1-year option.
Right.
But I was told very simply that 1-year option was non-negotiable and it wasn't happening from the player's side. Right. So I was able to,
as you say.
Yeah. So I was like, right, well, I can definitely close that off and say, and then very quickly, Ferenc stripped him of captaincy. They've then moved the transfer market's updated to say his contract's out. Everyone knows that that's him available now. I think I'd done a tweet that's saying that Jack Henry had been voted Defender of the Year based on a ratings of one of the national newspapers. And he had messaged me to say, actually, it's Player of the Year. I was like, I was like, excellent, mate. Right, okay, that needs to be updated.
So where do you think Gold might go?
I honestly have no idea. I know for a fact I've not spoke to a single person. I think the hope is that they get the Euro 2021 call up.
Yeah.
And they can do. Was it Hull Robson Cano that did that with Wales? Went to the Euros without a club.
Did he really? I didn't know that. Okay.
I think it was him. I might have butchered this.
Yeah.
But there was like a Welsh player who went to that Euros 2016 without a club.
Bell, actually, you're right.
And essentially used it as an auction. Because that's it. Like if he can go to the Euros and get. For me, I think everyone just thinks this is me just fanboying. I have loved Ryan Gauld since he appeared. Right, I was obsessed with him just because I'm a Glasgow Rangers fan. So when Ryan Gauld broke through, Rangers were in the lower divisions. So I didn't watch a lot of sports to begin with, and then I heard about this wee guy, and I was like, oh. So I'd watch it for Dundee United because they were actually a very decent side at that point. They had who'd you have in the team? Stuart Armstrong, Gary Mackay, Stephen, Ryan Gauld, Paul Payton. They were interesting. So I watched and I got obsessed with this guy and just followed him. So I think people just think I fanboy a bit too much over him. And I think that's what people think Twitter's happening as well. Yeah. It's just people that are overly obsessed with this one wee guy.
Yeah.
But if you watched the games that we've watched, if you watched the amount of hours we've watched, I know I post a penalty clip and expect everyone to get as excited as me because I'm great. Ryan Gauld can score a penalty or Ryan Gauld can take a corner. You're like, I know, but like, I do need to share this stuff because this is the stuff that people want to be kept in the loop of.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I have no doubts that if he turned up at the next Scotland squad, he would be in contention to start the next game. It's the same with Billy Gilmore. I have no doubts if he turned up, the manager would then have to go, holy shit. Right, okay, this is what's in front of me.
Yeah.
So I think he goes to the Euro. I think if he gets called into the Euros, I think he appears at the Euros, or at least in the friendlies beforehand, sells him into it, and then it's take your pick depending on how well you do.
Yeah, you're right. Gilmore's another one. I think he's been crying out for a Scotland game.
Yeah.
For a little while. I mean, he's getting games now, isn't he, at Chelsea? I just think he just offers something so different. I don't care about age and stuff like that. I think he's offering. If you've got a number of players who are the same in that position, I understand, but I just think he's got something else, isn't he?
Do you know what it is as well? It's almost the thing that I'm actually so envious of England for.
Yeah.
But it's the luxury of making international tournaments all the time. Is that England can pick a Theo Walcott that's not played for Arsenal yet. England can bring a Marcus Rashford that's just been brought in because you know what? If it goes tits up, they're going to beat the next major tournament.
Yeah.
So there's this element of Scotland being like, don't fuck this up because we're playing 2 of our tournament games at Hampden. There's a chance we might go through this group if we do it right. Because we also have the best third place position going beyond as well. And you're like, oh, so I think there's that panic of maybe not rocking the boat too much.
Yeah.
So just go with what you know and who you know's turned up to the squad, had integrated well with the players, gets on with each other.
Yeah.
And then we can worry about the rest of that if we get to the next tournament. I think there's an element of that, whereas England know, without a fiasco of 2008, England know they're going to every tournament.
Yeah.
So they can risk a couple of players that might not work out.
Yeah. Well, they've just got so much strength in depth as well, haven't they? When you look at comparison, but there you go. So, mate, just before we kind of get onto your football shirt choices, what's next with the podcast with Scots Abroad? Who would you love to speak to? Have you got any big guests coming?
So I want to try and get a Euro 2021 build-up going. So the idea is get Ray Bradshaw coming up because I want Ray to come on because I'm pally with Ray because the comedy clubs are opening up next week.
Mm-hmm.
So I want him to come up and talk a bit about that and a bit about touring and a bit about comedy world outside of Scotland and what it means to kind of bring it back.
Yeah. Beyond
that, I want them to try and get Alex McLeish on because he was the guy that started this Scotland campaign.
Right.
What was that, like 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
That UEFA Nations League started. I want to try and get him on because obviously he's managed in Africa and managed in Belgium. So it still fits the narrative of what Scots Abroad is. Then we are getting Jack Henry on, but we're just trying to find a suitable time because he's now in the playoffs in Belgium, so we don't want to disrupt that. And he might be going straight from there to the Euros, which means I can't disrupt that.
Yep.
The idea would be Jack Henry, Alex McLeish on a build-up to the Euros, and Sean Maloney. I would also hope to get in before the Euros to discuss Belgium. So the idea is try and building up a kind of Euro platform to go into the tournament and then watch what's happening with these different Scots abroads all over the place.
So, mate, the question I ask everybody on the podcast: what do football shirts mean to you?
I've listened to so many guests answer this, and I'm never going to be able to articulate this in a better way than the different people have. But it's almost like a bit of like a time machine to nostalgia for me, where I see a kit and I'll see a goal. I see a kit and I see that time. I see a kit and I see that time of my life. And that's just a constant all the time. So when I see these kits, it does just take me back to when I first saw that kit all the time. And I'll have an image of a player that played in that kit and scored in that kit, or a successful year that kit belonged to. So I think it's just that. It just takes me back. Mainly it takes me back to my childhood because, as I was saying to you before we started, kits were better. Quality wise, they've got better now, but back then kits were amazing. You could go year to year in that Serie A, which is controversial because it doesn't feature in any of my picks, but you can go to any year in that Serie A and you've got some absolute belters, whether it's Fiorentina, Parma, Juventus, Inter AC, that they're just unbelievable year on year. And it just feels like now it's a bit that's an Adidas kit, not so much that's an AC Milan kit. Well, that's a Nike kit. Cool.
It's very kind of template led these days, isn't it? There's less risk.
It saves them money. There's no designers creating specific kits if you're going with a key manufacturer, because it saves them money on designers. They just do it, rinse, repeat, roll out, change your colour.
But maybe that's just a sign of us getting old. Do you know what I mean? Which is hard back to the past.
Is that what's happened? Are we the old guys now? Is that it?
So, unfortunately, I think we are.
No. Is that why everything hurts?
Mate, so let's go to your first shirt pick. So this is a Rangers 93-94 away shirt by Adidas. It's the old orange and blue stripes. Very nice, mate. Tell me more.
So this was the first year that I ever went to football. So as I said before, I'm a Glasgow Rangers fan. This was the first year I ever got taken to football. So it was really the first year I developed a massive interest. I had vague memories of earlier games and stuff, but this was the first year. I remember the Rangers 5 in a row year where they almost made the Champions League final, but it wasn't quite sketched to my memory. I couldn't pick out anything specific. But I remember this was a year where Ali McCoist came back from his broken leg and scored that overhead kick against Hibs in the cup final. This was the year where I went to my first Old Firm at Ibrox. I won one game where it was a game where Celtic fans were banned from the stadium, and John Collins scored a glorious free kick into Colin Scott to go 1-0 up. And 45,000 people were just dead silent, and there was nobody there to celebrate. All you could hear was the players celebrating. So it was the most surreal thing that I'd ever seen. But that year, I remember going to Christmas. I'd never owned a football kit before. And I was like, I want the Rangers away kit. I'd only seen them wear it, I think, against Levski Sofia. I think that was maybe the game I seen them wear it when I was a kid. But it was this orange and blue stripe, but they also had a orange and blue stripe on one half of the shorts. So it looked like a button down nightie. It looked like a woman's nightdress all the way down on one side. And it was like, this top is beautiful. Like, this is all I want. And the reason this top, I found a picture of it when I was cleaning out the house. I just remember this top so much because I wanted the top for Christmas and I didn't get it when I woke up. It wasn't there for Christmas. But I was going through it with my grandparents the next day. And they had bought me it. And that was it. Like, when I got this football top, I was gutted because it had number 9 McCoist in the back, but I wanted number 14 McCoist in the back because my real memory of football was he wore 14 when he scored that cup final goal. And it hadn't dawned on me that he was a number 9. He was the number 9 player. But I was just obsessed with this kit. And I can see it now. It's like, I see articles on it all the time just now. It's like the most common chased after Rangers top that goes on sale through all the eBay sites. But it's clear they're fakes that are going through these sites, because anyone who owned this kit at the time will remember the minute this kit got washed, the blue fabric died off and it went like a kind of faded blue, and the orange pieces thread all went bobbly.
Oh no.
It was pure shite. It was awful. But it is my first ever football top I owned, and Rangers winning the double that year. It was just this. It's the one top whenever I see it. I remember just being a kid at Christmas getting that top, and I remember being excited to finally own a football top. So there was no way. There are so many better Rangers kits in my time. The 9 in a row kit, probably the home top from that cup final that McCoy used to wear. There was a few in the Advocate era that were absolute belters. But that top, just because it was my first ever top, there was no way I could not feature that. The minute you asked me, I had no doubts. I was like, I know my first one. I know that. But as we go, it becomes way more complex, man. I have no idea. I've stressed over this more than I've stressed over anything in my life.
Do you know what? I think that era, like you were saying, there were so many good, like, I'm a Celtic fan, I don't know if you know that, but like, there were so many good Rangers shirts over that era. And I remember always being really jealous around, similar age, like being a kid and thinking, oh, fucking hell, I really wish I could wear that Rangers shirt. And obviously I couldn't do it. Yeah, mate, amazing era for Rangers as well. I was going to ask you, as a Rangers fan as well, you mentioned that season, your semi-finals of that first Champions League, when it re-changed the format, right? After that, obviously so much success. It never really did much in Europe, did it? It never really did much in the Champions League. Why do you think that was?
I think teams just get more competitive. I think there was more money for European leagues, which meant they could bring in better players. I remember going, so that was the first year I appeared at any games, and then as the years went on, my uncle would take me to the Champions League games only.
Wow, okay.
And then normally the league game where we could tie up the title was the one that I'd get taken to, and the Old Firm games. And I remember going to these Champions Leagues, and I remember getting battered off Juventus, somehow drawn 2 each with Dortmund, then getting battered off Ajax home and away. And these teams were just a different planet. I just think Rangers were so ingrained in being the British style that suited to win the leagues.
Right.
That we maybe just, like, even see that year that we almost got to the final.
Yeah.
The results are still quite underwhelming. Like, two draws with Marseille are good because we came back for 2-0 down in one of them. Yeah. But we drew 0-0 at home to CSKA Moscow, who'd just been beat 6-0 by Marseille.
Yeah.
So it was a wee bit disappointing results wise. I just think we were too British a team, and the continental football just took over.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess there's a kind of, the world was a bigger place then as well, because you saw a lot of kind of big English teams like Man United, when they first got into Champions League, took a few bad results as well, didn't they? In terms of
and Arsenal got battered when they first went in. Blackburn, the year they won they won the Premier League, I think they were rotten. I remember, I think Mike Newell got a hat-trick in a game, but it was like the last game in the group or something. They were really, really poor. And I think that was when English football realised that if they were going to conquer Europe again, they had to go the way they ended up going, and buying foreign players and bringing them into the league to take over.
Yeah, interesting, mate. So how are you feeling at the moment about Rangers for next season? Obviously, you kind of broke the duck of Celtics leagues, titles in a row. Are you feeling confident with Gerrard? Is he going to stay?
Oh, he'll stay another year, because he needs to try and get the Champions League, because that's realistically what he probably imagines is his future remit is the Liverpool job.
Yep.
Which I know always sounds like a really naff argument to make, but where else does he go? He's already got the connection. He's proven he can now win a trophy. He's been good in Europe for Rangers, so he's obviously eyeing that job. So he's now in a bit of a, don't mess this up, prove that we can do it in the Champions League, and I'm a shoe-in for that job whenever it comes up, as long as I don't mess this up.
Yeah. For
me, it depends a little bit on what Celtic do now. Like, I think the job, a couple of people have said to me that they think I'm not a fan I'm a Rangers fan, right? So I'm not a fan of Scott Brown, right?
Yeah.
But I've just seen the video that Lustig put out there, and I've seen all these articles all season. Scott Brown was so much more to that club than I think any fan is going to realise until he's left.
Right.
But I was saying to my brother, we were going back in time, I was like, there's nobody that stands out as the next leader of Celtic in that team. No. And when I look at the teams that I've seen in my childhood that it went from Paul McStay straight to Paul Lambert. Neil Lennon was in that team. Scott Brown was in Neil Lennon's team. So there's been a seamless transition to the clear captain for 25 years now.
Yeah.
And I don't see who's next. I don't. Callum McGregor's what, 28, 29? So you're asking somebody who's already at the back end to maybe take over. I think Celtic have got they've not even named a manager yet, so that'll be interesting. I think if it's Eddie Howe, it'll be an interesting season anyway, because I think what Eddie Howe's football will make it an exciting football season.
Yeah,
for both of us.
But I think it depends how much money he's given to restructure and rebuild that team, because there seems to be a lot of players that A, need to go, or B, really want to go as well, doesn't there? So
yeah, there is definitely that. But all in all, Rangers, as long as Rangers hold on to their players, because there's still Euros, Barisic, Kamara are going to beat those Euros. Don't know, Leeds maybe renewing interest in Ryan Kent. Not going to hold on to Rangers players if there's English Premier League clubs sniffing around.
Yeah,
that's the reality of what Scottish football needs to be if it's going to get out of being this. Scottish football is in the perfect situation. It has no money in it.
Yep.
So it's got time to produce its own players or pick up bargains and sell them on for big money 300 miles down the road. It is perfectly situated, especially with everything that's just happened with Brexit. It's perfectly situated to cash in on this and just milk England for all its money and start getting that money coming through and developing younger Scottish players and going forward. And I think when I look at what's happening underneath Rangers' first team with Kai Kennedy, Nathan Patterson, King, Dixon, there's people coming through there.
Yeah.
It's got Celtic with Welsh coming through. I think there's a possibility there might be something good happening. We just need to get there.
Yeah, exactly. You need to. Well, we've ridden it out for a few years, mate. I think we can ride out another couple of years for his last come of age, I'm sure. Very nice. Right, mate. Let's move on to your second choice. So this is the France home shirt by Adidas, France '98. Tell me more.
Yeah. So this was definitely the first major tournament I remember watching. I remember this was my high school induction. So this was at the end of primary 7. They would take you up to high school for a day and show you where you'd be sitting, where your classrooms would be.
Yeah.
But it took place on the Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was the opening game of Brazil versus Scotland.
Okay.
So they told everyone that they would let everyone go home at 2:30 that was on the induction.
Right.
So I remember running home, getting dressed, sitting down to watch football with my brother, and just being really excited because I was, oh my God, this is a tournament. I remember watching Euro 96, but I don't remember any of it. Like, I know I watched it because I remember watching it with my brother and my grandpa, but I don't really remember watching it. I know I watched it, but I knew the players going into this tournament. I used to watch Serie A, so I knew Zidane. I knew all these. I knew Ronaldo going for Brazil. It was all exciting, and Scotland were playing Brazil. Scotland were playing the World Cup holders in the first game, so that immediately ignited my excitement. But nobody in my family was massively a Scotland fan. Like, nobody. We never went to Scotland games. It was always Rangers games we went to. That was what we followed. Rangers. We were Rangers fans. So there was no massive excitement for me to specifically Scotland, which is why Scotland kit here is not the featured kit, and why the Euro 96 kit, which seems so popular with previous guests, doesn't feature here, because it was just before. I don't have a linked memory to it, but I remember, I think in major tournaments I've always supported the home team. I've always wanted the home team to go far. So very quickly I was just attached to France, and I did watch a load of Serie A, so I was obsessed with Zidane.
Yeah.
And I think I was obsessed a wee bit with Zidane because the Scots Abroad element came in as well. I was quite obsessed with Paul Lambert when he moved to Dortmund.
Yes.
Because I grew up in Renfrewshire. I grew up in Linwood, and that's where Paul Lambert grew up. So his parents still live in Linwood. And I remember, like, the January of that 97 during the winter break, Paul Lambert was in, like, our local shop when me and my brother were in picking up his papers. And she'd go, oh my God, like, he's in the Champions League. This was this fascinating thing. And then I remember him playing against Zidane in the Champions League final, being like, there's no way they can beat him. There's no way they'll beat Zidane.
Yeah.
So I was just this obsessed thinking at 98. I was like, oh, Zidane's the captain. Zidane's the number 10. Zidane's the leader of this team.
Yeah.
And just remember, as soon as Scotland were out, my focus was in France. I remember that semi-final where Thuram, who'd never scored a goal, scores a left foot shot from outside the box. It bounces over the keeper. So he goes down too early. I'm like, oh my God. And then obviously the final. I remember that day. I was in a family holiday down in Haven Caravan Park that day. And we were in, like, the big community hall for the France-Brazil game. And I remember just being that way. almost an element of thinking Brazil were the baddies because they were so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like Brazil, they just won the World Cup before. They had Ronaldo, they had all the best players, and it felt like France were this wee team,
Yeah,
but this massive underdog. And I was like, I really want them to win. And just remember both Zidane's headers, and that strip is always just stuck out. I own it now. I didn't own it at the time.
Oh, nice.
But I own it now, and it just stuck with me so much that because I didn't have that connection with Scotland until like the last until maybe like 2004-05 was really when I started getting into following Scotland.
Right.
So I didn't really have a connection with a football top before then. And I remember that, you know what, that France 98 is probably the best collection of football kits I remember.
It was good. There was a lot of good ones.
The Croatia top, the blue one, the South Africa green, white and gold that's probably the best kit that I didn't have a connection to when I look back on the pictures.
Yeah.
The England top's good. The top that World Cup was just phenomenal. That World Cup was immense. So that the minute you asked me, I was like looking. I was like, there needs to be. I need to have an international top in here. And I thought, first major tournament that I sat down and watched end to end. Yeah. Who did I want to win? Who did I get obsessed with? I was like, definitely France.
Perfect, mate. It's a great choice. Nice. So, mate, final shirt you picked is an Arsenal home shirt. It was worn between 2000 and 2002 by Nike. What's the link with this one, pal?
Yeah, so this was when I started. The first time we got Sky, we got cable, okay. NTL appeared in the scene, and it was the council option to Sky Sports. If you couldn't afford a Sky dish,
teams as well.
Yeah, exactly. If you couldn't afford Sky Satellite, NTL was coming to your neighbourhood, and you could get it cheaper. So my mum knew I was obsessed with football, and she was like, we'll get Sky Sports then, we'll get the channels for you. Yeah. And up until that point, I'd never really watched English football outside of Champions League.
Okay.
I watched matches a day, but it was always Scottish football that I was obsessed with. I always wanted to watch Scottish football. And Freddie Ljungberg appeared. This guy with dyed a red streak in his hair, was playing for Arsenal, was just this mental guy that I didn't really understand. He'd scored the winner against England on his debut. He scored against Man U. I was like, this guy's different, man. I quite like this guy. I'd got any music at this point as well. I think it was 14, 15. Yeah. I'd got any punk music. I was like, oh, this guy's like everything I'm listening to. And then as you'll see, this is like my third kit with a collar. I obviously love a collar. And I started watching football that 2001. So it wasn't even, this is back in the day when you got value for your home kit. Right. A home kit was 2 years long.
Yeah.
As you just said. So it was a 2001, 2002 double season.
Yeah.
And I was just obsessed with Freddie Ljungberg. Yeah. I like, even embarrassingly, like, see when I see people with their Twitter handles that have players' names in them.
Yeah.
I will hear people mock them and I'll go, you're right. And then I'll go, my email address used to be freddieljungberg1986@hotmail.com. I think my first ever Bebo was Freddie Ljungberg 8 as well. So I'm like, I sympathise with you being that person right now. And the football that Arsenal played that 2001-2002 season was just unbelievable. This is the kit that Bergkamp scored that goal in.
Right.
Nicolas Dabizas. And I just remember the run into that title was just every game was Freddie Ljungberg. Every game was Freddie Ljungberg. Yeah. The run into that title was just Freddie Ljungberg. The FA Cup final against Chelsea, Freddie Ljungberg's running through. John Terry brings him down. He gets back up on his feet and curls the ball into the far top corner to make it 2-0. Everything was just Freddie Ljungberg. The collar's up on him when he's running around. I'm like, yeah, it takes me back to that point, and that was why I started following Arsenal.
Yeah.
And Arsenal have been my English team since. Like I actively follow Arsenal, so I'm a member of Arsenal Scotland. So we go to like 4 or 5 games a season. Normally away from home in the north of England, because that's what we get the better allocation for.
Yeah.
So like from Freddie Ljungberg onwards in that kit, I've always followed Arsenal. There's been some absolute amazing Arsenal kits in that time as well. The centenary strip was very close.
Yeah.
The maroon top was very close.
The Leaving Highbury one, yeah.
Yeah, and it's another collar. So I obviously do have a thing for this collar. I don't know if it's like a John Travolta or a Eric Cantona thing. It's been subliminally pushed into me when I was a child. But there's something about that collar up that I absolutely love. So there needed to be an Arsenal top in here. But this is the part where I feel so guilty, because I'm a Scots Abroad podcast. who's promoting Scottishness, and I do not have a Scotland national team top that I could point to and be like, that's the one. I would just be making one up for the sake of it.
Really?
I actually think that Euro 96 top is bogging. It's absolutely disgusting.
I just bought one to put in a frame, actually. I never had it as a kid, that one. I always wanted it, but I got it from eBay, right? And it's horrible. It's horrible.
I've got it. I've bought it as well. I've got it. I've got that in my. I've got that. I've got France 98, and I've got the Argentina 78.
Yeah.
The Euro 96 top is barking. It's so disgusting.
I don't know. I don't get the purple bits on it as well. Where that
it's disgusting.
From. Yeah. Yeah. Very strange. So Freddie Ljungberg, I wanted to ask you, what happened to him after he left Arsenal? He just never quite captured it again, did he? It was a bit.
I honestly don't know. Like I see when we announced him as a caretaker, and he immediately brought in like Saka. Well, they were already around, but it's Saka, Smith Rowe, and the people that were coming around that he was going to try and pull in. I've been saying this for a long time at Arsenal. Arsenal have been a club on the steep decline into being a Leeds United very quickly. To the point that I've been crying out just to play youngsters. So see, when we brought in the person who was with the academy, I was like, this is the perfect fit. We need to get rid of offering people like Ozil 350 grand a week wages because it's not sustainable. I loved Mesut. I thought Mesut Ozil was one of the best. I still think he's one of the best players that's ever played at Arsenal. But how that turned out was not it. You've given Aubameyang this massive deal to turn 35 on.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? It's odd.
It needs to be a person who just comes in and just rips it up and says, Saka, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Nketiah, Balogun. I think people like Holden, Tierney, Bellerin, you're fine with. You're absolutely fine with.
Yeah.
But I honestly thought when Ljungberg got the job, the caretaker, I was like, just give him the job and we'll just work with the youth team forward.
Yeah.
But too much money. Arsenal are currently a former club that still think they're as big as they were, and they need to kind of drop down a bit to rebuild and get back to where they actually should be, not where they think they are.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? And it's whether, you feel like that, if that Aubameyang deal, like you say, it does sound a bit desperate and you're trying to cling on. You think if we just give him that money, he'll get us enough goals to maybe get us in the Champions League, all that kind of stuff. You're right. Can they accept 2-3 seasons of mediocrity to build up these young players? And I don't think they can they? There's too much money at stake.
The thing I've always noticed with football fans, I am one, so I get it, is that you will be more patient if it's young players who support your club.
Good point.
So Saka would not get the same abuse as Aubameyang would for a poor performance.
Yeah.
Joe Willock would not get the same abuse that Mesut Ozil would for a poor performance.
Yeah.
Smith Rowe will not get the same abuse as Granit Xhaka does for a poor performance, because they are fans of the club. So on top of earning good money, it hurts them as much. I'm not saying these professional footballers don't hurt to lose games, because I know how I feel losing a game of 5-a-sides. So I know that these people aren't immune to being emotionally invested in a club. And I think the flip side of that is if you're seriously trying to claim that Kieran Tierney, because he's a Celtic fan, doesn't leave everything on the pitch for Arsenal, then you're mistaken. It's as simple as that. But I do think that people give more time if the team's full of people you honestly believe are supporters of the club. I do think there is an element of that. And I think they would give. Look at what's happened. We've had the star players and paid the wages, and it looks like we're going to finish 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
How much worse could it have got if you'd played Smith Rowe, Saka, Martinelli, and Nketiah, Balogun, Nelson? Like there's players there that I believe would have been done as good a job, if not better.
It's interesting. They've also let a lot of players go. I think like Hayden at Newcastle, like holding midfielder, like desperate for somebody that can stick the boot in a bit. Do you know what I mean? And they let him go, didn't they?
I'll always remember the tweet when we signed Flamini back on a free transfer the second time round. And it was like it was like 2016 Arsenal signed Matteo Flamini to replace Matteo Flamini when they sold him 6 years ago.
Oh dear, mate. Well, mate, look, that's 3 amazing shirt choices. Thanks so much for taking the time and obviously deliberating a lot as well, mate. It sounds like it's a tough decision.
It was, man. There was so many people don't know how many kits there could have been appear on this. There was one. I want to give one brilliant mention, and it's maybe just something for people to think about later on. Our producer is a Dumbarton fan, so he's a massive Dumbarton fan, and he actually got to create one of their kits.
Wow!
like in the 2012 season, he got to actually create a kit, and he was just talking about that. He goes, "You need to put this one forward. You need to put this one forward." I was like, "Aye, that's a chat for another day." But it was just like interesting because I was asking him, "Is like, do you think fans should have an input into potential kit choices?" And he was like, "Nah, this is unique, John. We had to deal with like 800 people. If Rangers put a vote up for a home top, there's going to be thousands of people very unhappy."
Yeah, you're right. A lot of clubs do that these days, don't they? You get like Twitter polls and things. And I know like Morton across the water from Dumbarton, they get fans to design their shirts as well, don't they?
Is that what they've been doing? I just remembered that he was constantly going on about this kit they designed, and it is an absolute belter. Like, it's really, really good.
Nice, mate. Nice. Well, mate, look, thanks so much for your time. Really enjoyed that. And as I say, I'm a big fan of the podcast, so everybody should kind of follow that and make sure you get listening before the Euros.
I appreciate it, and you need to do more episodes of these now, because I've now basically extinguished your library and I'm now run out.
Oh, mate, great to speak to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
So there you have it. Massive thanks to John for sharing his football kit memories with me. You can follow me and my own collection on Instagram, or get in touch via Twitter or email. Make sure you follow John on social too, and also subscribe to his podcast. Scots Abroad really is one of my favourites. The music you heard on the podcast was produced by Evaled. You can check out his music on his Bandcamp. There's links to everything I've talked about in the notes section. And finally, thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please do spread the word, give me a follow on social, subscribe to Football Kit Memories on your podcast player of choice. And other than that, I'll catch you next time.